Hi, this is Jonah Dempsey, your host of the Human Design Deconditioning Guide, and this is part 2 of Human Design for Astrologers. In the first part, we looked at how each sign of the zodiac that we use in Western astrology, or Eastern astrology for that matter, the 12 signs subdivide. And these subdivisions are based on the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. So I was using the example of Capricorn and saying that hexagram 10 falls into Capricorn. Hexagram 10 is treading on the tail of the tiger, and it's all about the characteristic of knowing how to not infuriate people, knowing how to be well-behaved, knowing how to be cautious and careful, and ultimately how to survive in different environments based on this knowledge of behavior and conduct and code of conduct. That sounds like a Capricorn thing to me, it's all about code of conduct. So then I looked at hexagram 54, the marrying maiden, and that's the story from ancient Chinese folklore of the Empress of China who started out as a concubine, and she rose the social ladder and became the Empress of all of China. Another Capricorn trait, right? This theme of ambition and of climbing to the top. We looked at hexagram 38, the fighter, all about perseverance and having the energy to fight for what has value. So these are some of my go-to examples when I'm describing how the hexagrams overlap with the signs, and they work kind of like decans. If you're familiar with decans, that's the subdivision of a sign into 3 parts. With the hexagram, it subdivides into 5 1/3 parts or something instead, but it's the same kind of idea. Okay, well, today I'm going to talk about something different, and I touched on this in the first part, but what I'm going to talk about today is actually the design calculation. So in human design, we take 2 calculations when we're running a natal chart called a body graph. The first calculation is the moment of birth, and this is the personality calculation. So this is identical to the calculation that we do in astrology. We look at the position of the planets at the time of the person's birth. So this is the same, but in astrology we say that this makes up the characteristics of the person. In human design we say it makes up the characteristics of the personality, but not their unconscious. It's the characteristics of their mind. It's the characteristics of their ego even, although the ego is more a part of the personality and not the whole personality. But in any case, the planetary positions at the moment of birth are very, very important, and they give the personality certain attributes. So people born at different times have different characteristics in their personality. Their mind has different characteristics. Their mental processes, their metaphysical processes, everything besides the body, right? But the body, actually we do a second calculation, and that's called the design calculation. And so the calculation for the body, we look at where the planets were, 88 degrees of the sun's motion, so 88 degrees solar arc we could say, or it's kind of a fancy way of saying it perhaps. 88, we take the sun, whatever degree the sun is on, whatever minute, whatever second, the exact position of the sun at the time of birth, then we subtract 88 degrees exactly from that. Then we look at where all the other planets were when the sun was at that position. We take a snapshot of the sky when the sun was 88 degrees retrograde from where it is at the time of your birth, which is approximately 88 days. It's approximately 3 months. But of course, this is an exact calculation. I'm just saying the approximate number so you get an idea for it. But you want to do this extremely precisely. It has to be exactly 88 degrees, not off by a second, right? And then what you do is you have this exact calculation of the design date. The design date is said to be the date when the soul of the body, so to speak, the design crystal of the body, entered the fetus. So about 6 months into pregnancy, this design crystal, which is really the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of the unconscious, and so on, the soul of the unconscious, you could say, enters into the fetus. And for the next 3 months, it proceeds to build the 9 centers. And there's even an area of human design devoted to the study of basically prenatal human design, which is all about how these centers are formed and in what order and how long each one takes and so on. But for those last 3 months approximately of gestation, the 9 centers are formed. So human design has the premise that we are a binary consciousness. We are 2 consciousnesses in one. We're the consciousness we're aware of, and we're the consciousness we're not aware of, which is called the unconscious or the subconscious. That's what Freud discovered. That's what Jung talked about. Even, I guess we could say Nietzsche knew about it. That we're not master of our own domain, that there's a second consciousness within us. And going further back, the Phoenicians knew about it. They had 2 burial rituals, one for the conscious soul and one for the unconscious soul. Of course, they didn't use those terms. They just said we have 2 souls, the soul of the mind and the soul of the body. So I think they even had separate burial places. I'm not exactly sure, but in any case, that's the premise of human design, is that it's not that human design is saying astrology is wrong. It's saying human design is saying astrology has got it right when it comes to the mind. That all of the astrology that you apply to somebody, the reason it works, the reason it's accurate, the reason the person goes, oh yeah, that's totally me, and the reason you can see it play out again and again and again, is because it's accurately describing how their mind works. It's accurately describing how their psychology works. Now this is something that Hellenistic astrologers are going to have a real hard time with, see, because the Hellenistic astrologers have this real anti-psychological astrology bent, where they like to talk about astrology's predictive potential and this and that. Well, just because it's talking about the mind doesn't mean it doesn't have a real impact on the world. In fact, the world is a lot more mental than we, make it out to be, in the sense that the physical is in many ways determined by the metaphysical, and we could say that the mind is both the conduit for and one of the agencies of a conditioning force, a metaphysical conditioning force that conditions the physical world to be what it is. So those Hellenistic astrologers are still kind of correct when they say that astrology has some predictive potential. It's just astrology only has predictive potential as long as the mind is running the show. And what human design is all about is usurping the decision-making power of the mind and returning it to the body. So when the body is able to make decisions, then the predictive capabilities and potentials of astrology go out the window, because it's no longer relevant. You're no longer, the world is still affected by Mercury retrograde. You'll still have a flight delay, and the contract will still have typos in it, and all that Mercury retrograde stuff, because people out in the world aren't making decisions with their body, they're making decisions with their mind. So you're still going to experience all of the astrological predictive stuff out there in the world, and it's still going to be valid simply because people aren't making decisions, with their bodies. But if you're making decisions with your body, if you're a generator and you're going or to make your decision, or if you're splenic and you're feeling a twitch or the hair on the back of your neck, or some kind of almost like muscle testing or trance states, there's different ways people have gotten in touch with the unconscious and have given up control of their decision-making to the unconscious. It's terrifying, though. It really is terrifying, because the mind is always going to tell you, oh, you'll end up homeless, you'll end up broke, you'll end up making the wrong decision, unless you think really hard about it first. So you get back into thinking, when really the body, the form, is infinitely more intelligent and knows the right decision every time. But in any case, this is the premise of human design. So there's the personality calculation and there's the design calculation. And the personality tells you how your mind works, and the design tells you how your body works, and also how the unconscious of your mind works. So what can we learn from this? First of all, you get 2 natal charts. That's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. I've heard astrologers complain about that and say, oh, it seems so arbitrary. Why 88 degrees and not 89 or 81 and a half, or, well, there's reasons for it. And instead of asking the question, which, by the way, if you're asking that question, you probably have probably have gate 63, but I always get that from people who have gate 63, the gate of doubt and skepticism. They're always asking those questions. Why is it this and not that? You probably have a, undefined head also, thinking about all that stuff that doesn't really matter. But, my answer to that is there are reasons, and you have to study human design to find out. So if you want to learn about the 88 degrees and why it's necessary, the calculation, then the short of it is that is a calculation that continually, you start with 90 degrees and then you offset it a little bit. And the reason for that offset is that it perfectly creates a zigzag of motion so that everything isn't really proceeding linearly in lockstep. It's proceeding in this zigzag where the unconscious goes into the next gate before the conscious does. So it's continually like leading the way. So the unconscious seeds are constantly coming up and bubbling up to the surface at a lag time. Whereas if it were 90 degrees, it'd be happening at the same time. So it's basically almost like that's how premonitions and predictions and things can work, is because there is a lag time or there is a division. Like stuff that happened 88 days ago is coming to fruition now. And what's happening right now is going to be the subtext for what happens 88 days from now. And there's reasons why it's 88, and I'm saying days, really it's degrees of movement of the sun. But anyway, this is all a topic for what's called rave cosmology, and there's a wonderful rave cosmology series. If you contact me, I can point you in the right direction there. So, but as far as these two charts, that's what I'm getting at. It's kind of cool. You have two natal charts, basically. Or you have a natal chart for you, and then you have a natal chart for this other thing that's not you, but that's actually the intelligence of your body. Personality number 2, we could call it. Or really your number 2, because you came after, and it was already inhabiting the form. And so it's already a really weird idea, but it's no weirder than Freud or Jung or anyone who espouses the reality of the unconscious. All of that's pretty weird. Wait a minute, you mean there's some other thing that has other desires that are different from my desires? Or what I think my desires are? Right? You mean my self-report to myself is not totally accurate because it's skewed, and there's this whole other aspects of myself I don't even realize that aren't even really myself, because myself is what I identify with, and I don't really identify with that. Or technically it is myself, it's just those parts of myself I don't identify with, I need to learn to identify with. Whatever the case, you can see how complex it gets. And this is something that's not just from human design. This is something that obviously comes from psychoanalysis, even going back to Nietzsche, who was perhaps the first depth psychologist, as Jung quipped. And Nietzsche was also struggling with this stuff. So there's this idea that, you have your personality, your mind, you that you recognize, you where you go, oh, all these characteristics, oh, of course that's me, of course I'm like that. Then there's this second thing, your unconscious, your design, your body, this second consciousness. Remember, just because we say unconscious doesn't mean it is unconscious, it means it's unconscious to you. It's its own consciousness. It's a secondary consciousness, just like another person, just like another human being, right? And you have this second consciousness within you that you have no access to. And you have to kind of figure out what it wants, and figure out what its personality is like, and figure out what its characteristics are like, and what is its character. Because you don't know that. You don't know that the way you know your own character. So you end up with these two charts, or these two calculations, the personality and the design. Now, human design actually works with the quantum of the two. It's similar to a composite, similar to synastry, probably more similar to composite than synastry, but it's not taking the midpoints of the charts together. Now, that is something that's really interesting to do. It's very interesting to do that, to run a composite chart with your personality and your design date. It's really interesting. And if you want to do that, go to mybodygraph.com, generate a free body graph, then look at the design date in UTC, then create a new natal chart for London, England, or wherever is 0 UTC, and enter in that design date. And then you can do a composite between the two. You can also do synastry between the two. But that's not what human design is doing. What human design is doing is it's superimposing the two on the body graph, which is the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching overlaid on a 9-center matrix that's connected by 36 channels. It's not 32 channels because there's extra channels because some of the gates, the integration gates between the spleen, sacral, G-center, and throat actually open up to more than one channel. Each gate does double or triple duty, you could say. I guess it's triple duty. So anyway, what human design is doing something like a composite or like synastry, but it's not a composite, it's not synastry. They're taking these two calculations and they're superimposing both of them onto the 64 gate matrix. They have the 64 gates that are activated, and then that matrix is laid out in these 9 energy centers, and which are kind of like chakras, and then different energy centers will activate or be connected or not depending on which gates are activated, because the gates are laid out in channels where gates have a harmonic, where most of the gates anyway, all but 4 of them, connect to one other gate only, its harmonic gate. So, and there's also interesting relationships to its oppositional gate, which is 180 degrees opposite on the wheel, and is a mirror image. So if one hexagram is yin, 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 yang, yang, the other will be yang, 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 yin, yin, yin. Or if one is yin, yang, yin, yang, yin, yang, the other will be yang, yin, yang, yin, yang, yin. So the yang and yin lines, the unbroken and the broken lines, respectively, will be switched at opposition. Okay, so let's just look at what we have here. So we have 2 charts. We have your natal chart and we have your design date, 88 degrees retrograde of the sun before you were born. So what can you do with this, and what does this already tell you? First of all, it tells you that astrology, if you believe human design, is only describing your conscious mind. And your conscious mind has a lot of influence, but that's what it's describing. Doesn't mean it's purely psychological in the sense that there's no agency or impact on the world around you, because obviously your mind activations are a part of your aura. They combine with the body activations and they go out there in the aura. And so you attract certain kinds of experiences to yourself and you repel certain kinds of experiences from yourself, and you have all of this auric stuff that happens even with those mind activations. So Hellenistic astrologers might say, well, geez, human design is just reducing astrology to being purely mental and saying it has no impact on the real world. No, the mental has an impact on the real world. The mental impacts through the aura, and it also impacts through the decisions that we make and the kinds of trajectories and sequences of events that we enter into. So, but it is crucial to realize that there's this whole second aspect, second consciousness that's missed out on by astrology. It's the consciousness of the body. And it seems really far-fetched to say, wait a minute, how do we know what the personality of the unconscious is like? I mean, it's kind of a bizarre idea, right? But it's like, well, geez, I'm a Libra, but my unconscious is a Cancer? I'm sharing this form with a Cancer, and not only am I sharing it, but it's the master of the form. It's like the master of the house. You know, it's a weird idea, right? And that's what human design is claiming. I mean, it's preposterous to some astrologers I've talked to about this who said, that's preposterous. You can never know the unconscious. That's why it's unconscious. Well, human design is saying you might not know it, but you sure can have a map of it. And that map is the design date. So, okay, so what else is this telling us? Well, there's interesting situations. Some people are very harmonized with their unconscious. This is another reason why we need that 88 degrees. If we had 90 degrees, there would either always be a harmony or always be a disharmony. I think it would always be a harmony. But with 88 degrees, it alternates between harmonious and disharmonious. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying that as the sun moves through the lines of each hexagram, starting at the first line, then the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, there's 6 lines in each hexagram, the design sun, the 88 degrees offset sun, also moves through the lines of the hexagram. But because it enters into the next line before the personality sun does, because of that 88-degree offset, the zigzag I was talking about, you end up alternating harmony and disharmony. So the first profile is the 1-3. This is when your personality sun is in the first line of a hexagram. The designed sun is in the third line of a hexagram. This is a disharmony. It's a disharmony because the 1 and 3 are not harmonious to each other. The 1 and 4 are harmonious to each other, just like the 2 and 5 and the 3 and 6, you know. And because they're disharmonious, people who are born as 1-3s, their unconscious wants something totally different than what their conscious wants. There's no harmony between what their conscious mind wants and what their unconscious wants. It's like a square, almost, we could say, in astrology. It's like their conscious and their unconscious are squaring each other. But then the next profile, the 1-4, is harmonious. They both want basically the same thing, just a different octave of the same thing. The first line just wants stability. The third line just wants anarchy and chaos. So that's disharmonious. But then the fourth line wants stability too. It just wants stability through communities and through networking. So the 1-4 has a harmony because their first line, their conscious, just wants physical stability and stability in their knowledge and freedom from fear. And then their unconscious fourth line just wants community stability and social stability and things like that. So they're very harmonious. And the next one's the 2-4. That's disharmonious again. And then the 2-5 is harmonious, and then the 3-5 is disharmonious, and the 3-6 is harmonious, and so on. And it keeps going. And this is why the 88 degree is so profound. And this is also an explanation for what's interesting. I guess the interesting observation we have here, you have these two natal charts. You have your natal chart, and then you have the design date chart. And what's really interesting about this is that some people, they're going to really have a lot of trines between those, and they're going to really get along. I mean, obviously, everyone's going to have a fundamental square of their suns. Why? Well, because it's 88 degrees. It's 2 degrees orb of the 90 degree square. So everyone's going to be within 2 degrees orb of a square between their personality sun and their design sun. Well, this is also interesting. It says that we're all basically squaring our unconscious. Right? But there's still going to be a difference here because people born around the cusps, for instance, or people born, it's possible. It depends when you were born, right? If you were born at the very end of your sign, then you can have an out of sign square. Or is that right? It's possible to have out of sign squares. But in any case, or is it actually? Because 88 degrees, it's always 88 degrees before. Yeah, it seems like it is. If you were born on the 29th degree, then your design sun is going to be on the first degree of, 2 signs before you. So I'm a Libra, and my design sun is Cancer. But if I were born on the 29th degree of Libra, then my design sun would be Leo. So that's already an interesting thing. There's some people, I guess we could say 1/15 of people out there, because of that 2 degrees. There's 1/15 of people out there whose conscious and unconscious are only 2 signs away from each other rather than being 3 signs away from each other. So that's really interesting too. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff you can get from this, right? So here's what I want you to do. If you're interested in this, if you want to learn this, go over to mybodygraph.com or jovianarchive.com. There's different places that'll create free body graph for you. And enter in your birth information, and then take note of your design date and cast a natal chart for your design date. And again, it's going to show you in UTC, which is Greenwich, Meridian time, GMT. And so because it shows you in GMT, you can just put London, and you can cast a new natal chart with your GMT design date time for London. And then you can have these 2 natal charts and ponder it. I mean, I'm sure you've looked at your natal chart countless times. If you're an astrologer, you probably know your own natal chart like the back of your hand. But you've probably never, unless you've already done this before, but if you're new to human design, then you have never seen the natal chart for your unconscious. And it's like another person. It's like another person, It really is. And all Libras, except for 1/15 of them, so 14 out of 15 Libras have a Cancer sun unconscious. And 14 out of 15 Scorpios have a Leo sun unconscious, right? interesting. It's interesting when you start looking at it like that, right? You start to realize that your unconscious is at odds in a very literal sense. It's not 180 degree opposed, but it's close to 90. It's 88 degrees, right? Square. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. This has been your host, Jonah Dempsey of the Human Design Deconditioning Guide. Until next time, thanks for watching.